Hi friends and strangers alike. Over on my Tumblr page, I get quite a lot of people asking if they can use my headers and dividers on their own Tumblr blogs. And hey, it's a free world. I can't stop you. However, for the sake of uniqueness and the fact that I do work hard on them, I really prefer that people don't. But I thought rather than completely gatekeeping them, I'd record my process step by step to hopefully show people who are starting out or just want to learn something new and get a few pointers just one way that you can go about doing these sorts of things for yourself. Or two ways, as the case may be. So the main bulk of this video is going to be Photoshop because that's what I use and I personally feel that I get the best results from. Hopefully you have access to it. If not, they do often offer free trials, so hopefully you could sign up for that and then hammer out as many headers as you need within the trial time. Or failing that, you could just give up a life of capitalism and go adventuring on the high seas. I'm sure you can find plenty of help on Reddit about how to become a pirate. Or if none of those things work for you, jump to the timestamp on the screen now where we try Canva. I don't personally have a lot of experience with it, but I do know people that do, and I'm told it's actually a really good alternative. It has a premium paid option, but the free stuff is also pretty adequate and easy to use. And as someone who's never made a YouTube video before, I'd say that was a pretty good intro. Now let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is make our canvas. Spoiler alert, I forgot to record this originally, so you can already see the final product in the recent projects. But anyway, to create the canvas, we're going to go to New File, and then we're going to set our dimensions. I'm changing my units to pixels just because that's how I was taught to use Photoshop, but if you want to use something else, you're welcome to. However, you will have to convert the dimensions yourself. I'm going to make the width 1350 and the height 120, and then make sure we're in the landscape position just so it matches all of my other headers, but if you wanted to change them around in your free time, you are welcome to. And then 300 resolution is probably a bit excessive, but oh well. Anything above 100, 150 should be fine, but don't drop any lower or else you might find that the image looks quite grainy when you upload it to Tumblr. And then finally just press create. This next bit is more habitual for me. I'm just removing the white background and making it transparent. You can do the same, but we're going to fill it in soon anyway, so there's no real need. I just thought I'd explain it anyway in case anybody was wondering how I went from a white to transparent background right here. First off, I'm going to unlock this layer by clicking the padlock up here. And then I'm going to go over to the toolbar on the left and I'm going to find the magic wand tool. You might have to right click on the object selection tool and go to the drop down menu to find it, but it is there, I do promise. Then I'm going to left click on the canvas and press the delete button on the keyboard. And that should leave us with the grey and white chessboard effect on the back, which signifies on Photoshop that your background is transparent. There is nothing there at all. Then press deselect on the toolbox that's popped up at the bottom, or else you will not be able to do anything else until you do. And then we're going to relock the background layer by pressing the padlock button again, or else everybody who has ever taught anybody anything about Photoshop will personally yell at you because it's a big no-no to not have your backgrounds locked. In this same bottom corner there is a little box with a plus sign in it. We're going to click on that to make a brand new layer to start working on. Back to the toolbar, I'm going to click on the paint box tool, but you might have to right click on the gradient tool to find it, and then I'm going to go down to the coloured boxes at the bottom of the toolbar and pick the colour I want, press OK, and then click on the canvas to fill everything in. The screen wasn't quite dark enough for me, so I went back in and did it again. Now I want to draw in some stars, make it look a bit like a galaxy. To do that, I'm clicking on the paintbrush tool on the toolbar, and then at the top, mine says 6, but yours might say a different number. That's the size of the brush, and if you click on it, a box will open with lots of options for brush types. Now you'll notice that I have a lot of brushes. If you've only just downloaded Photoshop or you don't really use a lot of different brushes, you probably will only have these top 4 box options. I'm just going to use one of the special effects brushes that comes as standard, and I'll show you that shortly, but if you want more options, you can click this little cog in the top right corner and then go down the drop down menu to get more brushes. This will take you to Adobe's website where you can download all sorts of cool brushes for completely free of charge. And we like free of charge. Back into Photoshop, I'm going to use this special effects splatter brush. And here I've just skipped forward a little bit because I realised that I forgot to add a new layer. So for anyone who's not super familiar with keyboard shortcuts, rather than using my mouse to go to the Edit tab and press undo 50 times over, I'm instead holding down the Control key and tapping the Z letter on the keyboard over and over until my slate is completely clean. Another way around something like that would be to play it a lot safer and save every time you start doing something new. That way you can just open up your last save from before you use the brush. I did not do that because of course that would make things too easy. Now that that's cleaned up and I have added a new layer to work on, with my splatter brush selected, I'm just tapping different parts of the screen to make a splatter pattern. It's sort of like using a toothbrush in real life to spray paint across a physical canvas. Then I'm duplicating the layer by making sure it's selected and then pressing Ctrl and C to copy and Ctrl and V to paste. And I'm lining this new layer up just a little bit off the center and to the top so that when I lower the opacity of the original layer, the whole thing just has a bit more depth. You can get a similar effect from using the drop shadow tool, but that involves a few extra steps that I don't really need for the look that we're going for. Here I noticed that the far right was looking a bit barren, so I drew on some more stars and just repeated the exact same steps from before. So that I don't have lots of layers floating around, I'm pressing down the Control button and then selecting the two less opaque layers, and then right clicking and selecting Merge Layers, and then I'm doing the same with the other two starry layers. This does exactly what it says on the tin, so that all the shadowy stars are on one layer and then all the opaque stars are on another. For ease, we should really be naming the layers as we go, and if you're just starting out, I would recommend doing that, but I tend to sort of put that off until I've got a lot of layers on the go at once. To rename layers, all you have to do is double click on the layer in question. Moving on, we're going to add the text. So that the stars aren't a distraction, I've hidden them by pressing the eye-shaped icon on the left of the layer name. Back to the toolbar, about 2/3 of the way down, we need to click on the text tool. It should choose this one automatically, but if not, right click and just make sure you're selecting the horizontal type tool, which looks like a fully solid capital T. There's no sort of arrows or anything around it. Type in the name of your title character, and then here I'm using the move tool and holding down the shift key as I drag out the text to make it bigger, but you can also enlarge it by using the character toolbar on the right of the screen just above your layer box. In another tab, I've already found an image of a comic title that includes Hal's name and copied that in. You don't have to do this, but I like to try and emulate the style of the character's logo if they have one. So I'm just getting a good look at this, and then I'm going to scroll through my fonts and see if I can find anything that encapsulates the vibe I'm going for. Similar to the brushes, if you want more fonts to choose from, you can click the Adobe icon at the top right corner of the font menu. This will take you to Adobe's font website where you can browse and download lots of cool free fonts, usually all made by and licensed by independent type designers. Sometimes when the fonts don't cut it, I will take time to freehand them, but after a lot of deliberation I decided that Liquor Store Jazz worked for me today. Funnily enough, I think I used the same font for Kyle and maybe Captain Cold, and a lot of personal projects too. It is a favourite of mine. To try and mimic the white and green outlines, I'm going to add an outer glow by right-clicking on the text layer and then choosing blending options. This opens up a new window with lots of effects, including the drop shadow that I mentioned earlier, but for now I only want the outer glow. Of course, I'm choosing a green colour to start out with, and then I'm just playing around with the different sliders until I'm happy with the result. For reference, of course, opacity controls the opacity. Noise will add or remove grain depending on which way you're going. Spread is how soft the edges of the glow will be, so the higher, the harder, and the lower, the softer. And sizes for size. Now that I have the green edge for contrast, I'm going to change the red to black. I also want to add a white glow, but unfortunately I can't add a second outer glow to a layer that already has one. Some effects, like the drop shadow in the overlay, will allow this, but not the outer glow. To get around that, I'm going to change the text layer to a standard layer by dropping the paint bucket onto it. Photoshop won't let you paint a type layer, so what it's going to do instead is rasterize the layer for you. Without getting into all the technicals, this essentially just means it will turn it into a standard layer. It will retain the outer glow effect status though, so I'm going to add another layer and merge them together, and then voila, the glow is retained, but I can add another to it. We can't, however, change the text anymore. We are officially committed to it. There are other ways to do this, but this is just my preferred method. Back into blending options and outer glow, I'm just repeating the previous steps to make a white border. I don't like this little gap between the R and the D. If we were still in type mode, we could have used the character toolbar to change the spacing in between the letters. However, we're not in type, and I like the spacing as it is. So instead, I'm going to use the color picker tool to select the green that we used in the border. Then I'm selecting the paint tool and changing the brush to something more solid so I can close up the gap by painting it in. And just having a look at the rest of the letters to make sure that there's no more gaps that I want to close up. I've jumped the video forward here because I decided I wanted to capitalise all the letters. I haven't done anything different though up until this point here. Use the move tool to move the text to the left hand corner, which is pretty much where all the names on my headers go, but obviously you can put yours wherever suits you best. This font doesn't have an italicized option, but I do want it to have a bit of a lean. So with the layer the text is on selected, I'm going to go up to the menu on the top bar, then go to Edit, and down to Transform, which is about halfway down the menu. And finally, I want the Skew option. The little boxes around the text are called transformers. I'm going to click and hold this top middle one and drag it until I'm happy with how it looks. If you wanted to, you could use the magic wand to select and delete all the black sections from the font. That way you can see the stars coming through, but I prefer it as is. Next up, and probably the trickiest part, is bringing Hal into the picture. And I've already got him in another tab, as you saw earlier. I don't ever use fan art or other people's edits, but you probably could so long as you do have explicit permission from the artist or editor. And I only want Hal's face, more specifically the eye area. I'm going to start by using the rectangle marquee tool to select his head, and then I'm going to copy and paste the selection and then delete or hide the layer that has the original image on. I was a bit overly cautious and took too much, so now I'm just using the same rectangle tool to select the spaces on either side of him. I'm not copying this time, I'm just deleting. I'm speeding up the video here, but at the minute I'm just using the magic wand to select and delete anything in the background. Just be careful and pay attention to anything selected as to make sure that you don't accidentally delete Hal's line art or anything like that. If you're finding that the wand is selecting too much or barely anything at all, try amending the tolerance in the toolbar towards the top. There is actually a faster way to do this, but it's not always reliable. It's a fairly new feature, so I tend to forget about it. But during editing, I hop back into Photoshop to see how well it does. So we're just going to select the images layer, and when this toolbar pops up, we're going to select Remove Background. Oh. Hot damn. Well then. If for some reason your toolbar isn't there, just try checking the window on the top menu. And make sure you have the contextual toolbar on. It's towards the very bottom of the menu. So if you did this and it worked for you, skip to the timestamp on the screen to continue. Or if you're trekking through it the old-fashioned way like I am, keep watching. Back to where we left off, I'm pretty much done with the wand and I'm just using the eraser tool, which is above the paint bucket on the toolbar. Go back in and clean everything up. Here I've made the background green so that any blue left on the edges stands out a bit more. And now, rather than trying to meticulously erase every single blue pixel, I'm instead going to embolden his line art by drawing over the blue with black. But first, to make that easier for ourselves, I'm going to add a clipping mask. To do that, I'm going to add a new layer above the image layer, then right-click this new layer and select Create Clipping Mask. This will keep anything drawn on the clipping layer in the confines of the image. So I can't draw anything over here on the green, but I can still draw over the top of Hal. And then I'm just going to draw all around his edges. I've sped this up to just a few seconds, but it took closer to like 4 or 5 minutes, I think. So just take your time and get it done at your own pace until you're happy. It might look a little bit choppy for now, but once it's shrunk down on the header, it'll look much better. Once that's done, I'm merging the clipping layer and the original layer together, and then copy and pasting the whole thing over into the header tab. Then, using the move tool, I'm just going to play around with his size and position until I found a spot that I like. All the extra work on the hair and the shoulders wasn't needed, but I just wanted a bit more content to show you guys what I was doing. Once you get the swing of things, you can probably forego the secondary tab completely and just do all of the work on this one canvas. Here, I've decided that the hair in the frame is too dark for my liking. Hopefully you won't have to do this, but should you need or want to in the future, this is how. There are actually lots of ways to play with the colours of things in Photoshop. On the top toolbar under Layer and New Adjustment Layer, there are lots of options for changing and playing around with the hues or the brightness, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I'm going to use my favourite technique. To start, I'm just flipping into that other tab and colour picking part of the hair that I like. Then back into the original tab. Then I want to use this polygonal lasso tool. If I'm overpronouncing that, that's because it took me 10 tries to say it in one recording. And then I'm using that tool to slowly follow the hairline. Once you've gone all the way around and you can see a little circle next to the mouse, that means you can close your lasso loop. Then I'm copy and pasting the hair layer, make sure it's lined up with the original. And then we're going back into blend options, and this time we're going to the overlay colour effect. The first colour it throws on probably won't be what you've picked up earlier, but don't worry. We're just going to click this coloured box, and instead of playing around with all these different options, unless you want to, of course, We're going to take our mouse over to the coloured box at the bottom of the toolbar and select that one instead. Then just have some fun with the opacity slider until you found a shade that you like. The edge of this new colour might be a bit harsh, but we can fix that too by going to the blur tool on the toolbox. It's normally under the paint bucket and it looks like a raindrop or a teardrop, whatever you prefer. And then the settings for it work exactly the same as the paintbrush, so if it's quite big you can go up to the top and shrink it down or make it bigger if you need to. And then just run it along the edge of the new colour. I'm going to speed things up again while I add some more glows and shadows and whatnot. These dots that you can see here mean that I've missed some of the spots back when I was doing the background. All you have to do to get rid of them is finish up whatever effect you're working on. And then take the eraser tool to the area until you've found and removed any spots causing that to happen. This was a pretty basic header, but there's so much more you can do if you take the time to learn and practice. There's cool gradients you can use or textures you can add or just all sorts of fun things. Depending on the kind of person you are, you might think that the 15-ish minutes this took was short or maybe way too long, but bear in mind that this is all sped up and it actually took me closer to about 35 minutes. It would probably go faster if maybe I took the time to draw something physical up first and then go in with a plan, but I like to play and trial and error everything. And I've been using Photoshop for about 4 years now, so this sort of thing probably would have taken me a lot longer back when I was a beginner. And I'm sure someone with more experience probably could have got this done in a few minutes. But this is my process, how I like to do it, and hopefully you found it fun or helpful. I assume you already wanted to learn if you've made it this far into the video, but hopefully it's inspired you or at least given you some tips going forward. If actually it's put you off, I'm really sorry. Or if Photoshop's just something you can't get your hands on at this point in time, there are other options. The main one of which is Canva. And honestly, I'm going into this as a total noob too, but let's see if we can make something half decent. And I did actually record myself setting the dimensions this time, but I must have accidentally deleted it or something because I cannot for the life of me find it. So anyway, here's me going back in and doing that. And to be totally honest, I prefer this starting screen and template choices way more than Photoshop's. It's just a lot cleaner, a lot more simplistic. But from there on, I'm a little bit lost. Not for any fault of Canva, I think. Just learning any new software can be kind of overwhelming to start with. But we do have a nice familiar T for text over here, so I'm just going to click on that and go from there. And of course we're doing Halligan. I think you can click and drag for size, but I'm using the toolbox at the top anyway. And then to the left of the size we've got our font selections. We don't have nearly as much choice here, especially once you filter out all of the free versus premium options, but there's still a pretty decent selection. I'm not ready to turn my nose away just yet anyway. It took me a little while to figure out, but eventually I realised that you need to click the grey background to come out of the type editing before you can start clicking and dragging your text around. And then back on the toolbar on the other side of the text size options, there's a colour picker. It does already have some colour options set out for you to choose from. Maybe I'm a control freak, I don't know, I just prefer picking for myself. Right now I'm just playing around until eventually I found the effects option on the toolbar, which gives us some cool choices. I immediately went for the outline because that was the vibe I was going for, but there are lots of other cool things to choose from by the looks of it. While I was messing around, I had a thought. If you really don't like any of the fonts on Canva, there's also a lot of cool non-commercial sites that offer free fonts that aren't Adobe. You download them onto your computer, but DaFont specifically will let you test them out on the website. And from there you could do like a screen grab and then import them into Canva or Paint or whatever software you might be using. To be clear though, you can only use these non-commercially unless you license them from the designer. So Tumblr, yay. Ko-fi, Patreon, nay. Also, you can't use them on Tumblr to advertise or direct people to places like Ko-fi. Anyway, back to Canva. There's an effects tool with stock backgrounds and stickers. And AI, because nothing is safe from it. I love these 4-point sparkly stars. If you've ever been on my Tumblr, I'm sure you're already aware. And they are such a pain to draw on Photoshop, so I was very excited by this. Especially since stars was the main theme for this whole header thing. I'm sure there's a more efficient way of doing this, I just didn't know what it was. But I decided to quote, draw, unquote, and drag out this box as my first attempt for a background. And then you have to press positions on the far right hand corner of the toolbar and then the back button or to back button in order to actually put it on the background. I played around with these stars for a while and I quite like how it turned out. If I did it again, I'd probably keep going down this path. But eventually I had a light bulb moment and I thought I'd check out the Elements tab again to see if I could find a starry night sky that we could use as a background. And I did. After a bit more playing with the fonts, this is where I ended up. It definitely doesn't match the vibe of my blog, but I think just like Photoshop, with time and practice, you could make something pretty compelling. I'm probably going to have to get much more well acquainted with Canva myself because my student discount for Photoshop is going to be ending real soon. So watch this space. And now I have to do an outro. What do YouTubers normally say? Like and subscribe if you found the video useful. Comment your favourite member of the Green Lantern Corps. No, actually, do that. That would be really fun. And hit me up if you want another tutorial on something else. Until then, I hope this helped and that you have so much fun making your own headers. Bye bye!